Chapter 3. After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advance him, and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. All the king's servants who were in the king's gate bowed down and did reverence to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai didn't bow down nor do him reverence. Then the king's servants who were in the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's commandment?" Now it came to pass, when they spoke daily to him, and he didn't listen to them, that they told Haman, to see how Mordecai's matter would turn out, for he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai didn't bow down, nor do him reverence, then Haman was full of wrath. But he scorned the thought of laying hands on Mordecai alone, for they had made known to him the people of Mordecai. Therefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. In the first month, which is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is the lot, before Haman from day to day, and from month to month, to the 12th month, which is the month Adar. Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, and their laws are different from those of every people, neither do they keep the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to allow them to live. If it please the king, let it be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, to bring it into the king's treasuries." The king took his ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. The king said to Haman, "The silver is given to you, the people also, to do with them as it seems good to you." Then were the king's scribes called in the first month, on the 13th day, and there was written according to all that Haman commanded to the king's satraps, and to the governors who were over every province, and to the princes of every people, to every province according to the writing of it, and to every people after their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus was it written, and it was sealed with the king's ring. Letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. A copy of the writing, that the decree should be given out in every province, was published to all the peoples, that they should be ready against that day. The post went out in haste by the king's commandment, and the decree was given out in Shushan the palace. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. Chapter 4. Now when Mordecai knew all that was done, Mordecai tore his clothes, and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and cried with a loud and a bitter cry. And he came even before the king's gate, for none might enter in within the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. In every province, wherever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Esther's maidens and her chamberlains came and told her, and the queen was very grieved, and she sent clothing to clothe Mordecai, and to take his sackcloth from off of him, but he didn't receive it. Then Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend on her, and charged him to go to Mordecai, to know what this was and why it was. So Hathach went forth to Mordecai, to the broad place of the city, which was before the king's gate. Mordecai told him of all that had happened to him, and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Also he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given out in Shushan to destroy them, to show it to Esther, and to declare it to her, and to charge her that she should go into the king, to make supplication to him, and to make request before him for her people. Hathach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Then Esther spoke to Hathach, and gave him a message to Mordecai, saying, All the king's servants, and the people of the king's provinces do know that whoever, whether man or woman, shall come into the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law for him, that he be put to death, except those to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter that he may live. But I have not been called to come in to the king these 30 days. They told Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai bid them return this answer to Esther. Don't think to yourself that you shall escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if you altogether hold your peace at this time, then will relief and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you haven't come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther told them, return this answer to Mordecai. Go, gather together all the Jews who are present in Shushan, and you fast for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast in the same way, and so I will go in to the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way, and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Chapter 5. Now it happened on the 3rd day, that Esther put on her royal clothing, and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house, and the king sat on his royal throne in the royal house, over against the entrance of the house. It happened, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near, and touched the top of the scepter. Then the king said to her, What do you want, Queen Esther, and what is your request? It shall be given you even to the half of the kingdom. Esther said, If it seems good to the king, let the king and Haman come this day to the banquet that I prepared for him. Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that it may be done as Esther has said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. The king said to Esther at the banquet of wine, What is your petition? And it shall be granted you. And what is your request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. Then answered Esther, and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king has said. Then went Haman forth that day joyful and glad of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he didn't stand up nor move for him, he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself and went home, and he sent and fetched his friends and Zeresh his wife. Haman recounted to them the glory of his riches, and the multitude of his children, and all the things in which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman said, moreover, Yes, Esther the queen, let no man come in with the king to the banquet that she had prepared but myself, and tomorrow also I am invited by her together with the king. Yet all this avails me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then said Zeresh his wife, and all his friends to him, Let a gallows be made 50 cubits high, and in the morning speak to the king, that Mordecai may be hanged on it. Then you go in merrily with the king to the banquet. The thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. Chapter 6. On that night the king couldn't sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. It was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's chamberlains of those who kept the threshold, who had sought to lay hands on the king Ahasuerus. The king said, What honor and dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? Then the king's servants who ministered to him said, Nothing has been done for him. The king said, Who is in the court? Now Haman had come into the outward court of the king's house to speak to the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. The king's servant said to him, Behold, Haman stands in the court. The king said, Let him come in. So Haman came in. The king said to him, What shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor? Now Haman said in his heart, To whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself? Haman said to the king, For the man whom the king delights to honor, let royal clothing be brought which the king uses to wear, and the horse that the king rides on, and on the head of which a royal crown is set, and let the clothing and the horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man therewith whom the king delights to honor, and cause him to ride on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Then the king said to Haman, Make haste, and take the clothing and the horse as you have said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that you have spoken. Then Haman took the clothing and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and caused him to ride through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house, mourning and having his head covered. Haman recounted to Zeresh's wife and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Then his wise men and Zeresh's wife said to him, If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, be of the seed of the Jews, you shall not prevail against him, but shall surely fall before him. While they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains, and hurried to bring Haman to the banquet that Esther had prepared. Chapter 7. So the king and Haman came to the banquet with Esther the queen. The king said again to Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, What is your petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted you. And what is your request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. Then Esther the queen answered, If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request, for we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondservants and bondmaids, I had held my peace, although the adversary could not have compensated for the king's damage. Then spoke the king Ahasuerus, and said to Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he, that dared presume in his heart to do so? Esther said, An adversary and an enemy, even this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. The king arose in his wrath from the banquet of wine, and went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen on the couch where Esther was. Then said the king, Will he even force the queen before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then said Harbona, one of the chamberlains who were before the king, Behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman has made for Mordecai, who spoke good for the king, stands in the house of Haman. The king said, Hang him there on it. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. Chapter 8. On that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman the Jew's enemy to Esther the queen. Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was to her. The king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. Esther spoke yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and begged him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held out to Esther the golden scepter. So Esther arose and stood before the king. She said, If it please the king, And if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come to my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my relatives? Then the king Ahasuerus said to Esther the queen and to Mordecai the Jew, See, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged on the gallows, because he laid his hand on the Jews. Write you also to the Jews as it pleases you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name, and sealed with the king's ring, may no man reverse. Then were the king's scribes called at that time, in the 3rd month Sivan, on the 23rd day, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews, and to the satraps, and the governors and princes of the provinces which are from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, to every province according to the writing of it, and to every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing and according to their language. He wrote the name of King Ahasuerus, and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by post on horseback, riding on swift steeds that were used in the king's service, bred of the stud, in which the king granted the Jews who were in every city to gather themselves together, and to stand for their life, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all of the power of the people in province that would assault them, their little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey, on one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar. A copy of the writing, that the decree should be given out in every province, was published to all the peoples, and that the Jews should be ready against the day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So the post who rode on swift steeds that were used in the king's service went out, being hurried and pressed on by the king's commandment, and the decree was given out in Shushan the palace. Mordecai went forth from the presence of the king in royal clothing of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a robe of fine linen and purple, and the city of Shushan shouted and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness, and joy and honor. In every province, and in every city, wherever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had gladness and joy, a feast and a good day. Many from among the peoples of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews was fallen on them. Chapter 9. Now in the 12th month, which is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, on the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have rule over them, whereas it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over those who hated them, the Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them was fallen on all the peoples. All the princes of the provinces, and the satraps, and the governors, and those who did the king's business helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai was fallen on them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went forth throughout all the provinces, for the man Mordecai grew greater and greater. The Jews struck all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and with slaughter and destruction, and did what they would to those who hated them. In Shushan the palace, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men, Parshandatha and Dalphon and Aspatha, and Poratha and Adelia, and Eradatha, and Parmashta and Arasai, and Aradai, and Vaizatha. The 10 sons of Haman the son of Hammedatha, the Jews' enemy, they killed, but they didn't lay their hand on the spoil. On that day the number of those who were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king. The king said to Esther the queen, The Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman. What then have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your petition? And it shall be granted you, or what is your further request? And it shall be done. Then said Esther, If it please the king, Let it be granted to the Jews who are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according to this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. The king commanded it so to be done, and a decree was given out in Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. The Jews who were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month Adar, and killed 300 men in Shushan, but they didn't lay their hand on the spoil. The other Jews who were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together, and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and killed of those who hated them 75,000, but they didn't lay their hand on the spoil. This was done on the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day of the same they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews who were in Shushan assembled together on the 13th day of it, and on the 14th day of it, and on the 15th day of the same they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore do the Jews of the villages who dwell in the unwalled towns make the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and of sending portions one to another. Mordecai wrote these things, and sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both near and far, to enjoin those that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar, and the 15th day of the same yearly, as they should make them days of feasting and gladness, and of sending portions one to another, and gifts to the needy. The Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written to them, because Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast pur, that is the lot, to consume them and to destroy them. But when the matter came before the king, he commanded by letters that this wicked device, which he had devised against the Jews, should return on his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Therefore they called these days Purim, after the name of Pur. Therefore, because of all the words of this letter, and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and that which had come to them, the Jews ordained and took on them and on their seed, and on all such as joined themselves to them, so that it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to the writing of it, and according to the appointed time of it every year, and that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memory of them perish from their seed. Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter of Purim. He sent letters to all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim in their appointed times, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them, and as they had ordained for themselves and for their seed, in the matter of the fastings and their cry. The commandment of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. Chapter 10. The king Ahasuerus laid a tribute on the land and on the isles of the sea. All the acts of his power and of his might, and the full account of the greatness of Mordecai, whereunto the king advanced him, aren't they written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was next to King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and accepted of the multitude of his brothers, seeking the good of his people, and speaking peace to all his seed. Now concerning spiritual gifts, brothers, I don't want you to be ignorant. You know that when you were heathen, you were led away to those mute idols, however you might be led. Therefore I make known to you that no man speaking by God's Spirit says, Jesus is accursed. No one can say Jesus is Lord but by the Holy Spirit. Now there are various kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit. There are various kinds of service, and the same Lord. There are various kinds of workings, but the same God, who works all things in all. But to each one is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the profit of all. For to one is given through the Spirit the word of wisdom, and to another the word of knowledge, according to the same Spirit. To another faith by the same Spirit, and to another gifts of healings by the same Spirit, and to another workings of miracles, and to another prophecy, and to another discerning of spirits, to another different kinds of languages, and to another the interpretation of languages. But the one and the same Spirit works all of these, distributing to each one separately as He desires. For as the body is one, and has many members, and all the members of the body being many are one body, so also is Christ. For in one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether bond or free, and were all given to drink into one Spirit. For the body is not one member, but many. If the foot would say, because I'm not the hand, I'm not part of the body, it is not therefore not part of the body? If the ear would say, because I'm not the eye, I'm not part of the body, it's not therefore not part of the body? If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole were hearing, where would the smelling be? But now God has set the members, each one of them, in the body just as He desired. If they were all one member, where would the body be? But now they are many members, but one body. The eye can't tell the hand, I have no need for you, or again the head to the feet, I have no need for you. No, much rather, those members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary. Those parts of the body which we think to be less honorable, on those we bestow more abundant honor, and our unpresentable parts have more abundant propriety, whereas our presentable parts have no such need. But God composed the body together, giving more abundant honor to the inferior part, that there should be no division in the body, but that the members should have the same care for one another. When one member suffers, all the members suffer with it, or when one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. Now you are the body of Christ, and members individually. God has set some in the assembly, first apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then miracle workers, then gifts of healings, helps, governments, and various kinds of languages. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Are all miracle workers? Do all have gifts of healings? Do all speak with various languages? Do all interpret? But earnestly desire the best gifts. Moreover, I show a most excellent way to you. Psalm 36, for the chief musician, by David, the servant of Yahweh. An oracle is within my heart about the disobedience of the wicked. There is no fear of God before his eyes, for he flatters himself in his own eyes too much to detect and hate his sin. The words of his mouth are iniquity and deceit. He has ceased to be wise and to do good. He plots iniquity on his bed. He sets himself in a way that is not good. He doesn't abhor evil. Your loving kindness, Yahweh, is in the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. Your righteousness is like the mountains of God. Your judgments are like a great deep. Yahweh, you preserve man and animal. How precious is your loving kindness, God! The children of men take refuge under the shadow of your wings. They shall be abundantly satisfied with the abundance of your house. You will make them drink of the river of your pleasures. For with you is the spring of life. In your light shall we see light. O continue your loving kindness to those who know you, your righteousness to the upright in heart. Don't let the foot of pride come against me. Don't let the hand of the wicked drive me away. There the workers of iniquity are fallen. They are thrust down and shall not be able to rise. He who follows after righteousness and kindness finds life, righteousness, and honor. A wise man scales the city of the mighty and brings down the strength of its confidence. Whoever guards his mouth and his tongue keeps his soul from troubles. The proud and haughty man, scoffer is his name, he works in the arrogance of pride.